Hi guys, so in this video I want to share a few tips on how to grow a zebra plecos fast. Well, I start with discussing the problem. So generally in pleco keeping hobby there is a myth that zebra plecos L46 are slow growers, so they need a really long period of time in order to reach adult size. So they need some people say a year and a half, others would say almost 2 years in order to grow from a juvenile into a full-grown adult. Well, most of these rumors are not based on any evidence, and basically it happens when you do not provide optimal and adequate conditions for your zebra plecos to grow. This is when they are really slow growers, and this is when it takes them literally years to reach their adult size. So I'll start with a bit of a background. If you're following our blog, you might have noticed that back in March we bought 4 juvenile zebra plecos, and there is a link somewhere here to the video when we set up the biotop style tank. And when we bought them, they were juveniles. They were each 3 centimeters long. So it's been approximately 5 months since we bought them, and this week I rearranged the tank. This is a tank. Previously this used to be a biotop style tank, Rio Shingu biotop style tank. Now I just removed all the sand, and this is a bare bottom tank now, because it makes it so much easier for me to clean the bottom of all the leftover food. So this is no longer a biotop tank. But when I was rearranging this tank, I measured them, and here you can see the pictures of them. And now they're each 6 centimeters long, so they've gained, they almost doubled in size over the 5 months, which is certainly goes against most of these myths that they take a really long time to grow. They don't take really a long time to grow. They can grow as fast as pretty much any other pleco and any other Hypancistrus species. So in order to make zebra plecos to grow fast, you need to follow a few very basic simple rules, and I will share with you my tips of growing these plecos really fast and making them to reach their adult size within less than half a year. So tip number 1, zebra plecos are not a community fish. Lots of people buy them for their community tanks because zebra plecos are peaceful, they're very colorful, so they seem to be a good fit for a community tank. But community tank would be the worst place to grow out your zebra plecos for a number of reasons. First of all, in order to prosper and thrive, zebra plecos require a very specific set of conditions. They require a specialized setup. So first of all, they prefer much higher temperatures than most other community fish, so they need approximately 30 to 31 degrees Celsius in order to grow fast. So this is certainly much too high for most of your community fish. Next thing is they need high flow. They need current in their tank. They need to feel this high flow. Yes, some zebra pleco keepers will say that high flow is not a requirement. They can live in a tank without flow, but if you provide them with a high flow, you will see how much they enjoy it and how much they like to be out and about in flow rather than in tanks where there is no flow. So certainly they would enjoy high flow, and a lot of community fish will not enjoy high flow. And probably the third reason why they're not a community fish is because they are not competitive feeders. So they cannot compete for food with your angelfish, with your barbs, with your tetras and so on. They cannot even compete for food with other plecos, for example with bristlenose plecos. Bristlenose plecos will simply chase them away from food, and in a community tank your zebras are likely to be hungry most of the time. They would be too scared to come out into the open in order to feed. They will hide throughout the day, most likely also throughout the night, and they will get probably some leftovers they can find, and it will take them really years to reach an adult size in a community tank. Also, if there's a lot of fish around, there are lots of active fish, you might expect that zebra plecos would be kind of more active, and they will feel emboldened to come out and to be out in the open. But in most cases it happens the other way around. They would see larger fish, they would see more active fish, so that would scare them off, and they will try to stay in their hiding places most of the time. If you have no, well, preferably you have no other fish with your zebra plecos, and that's when they become active, and that's when they're out and about. You can see my zebra pleco male is sitting here right in the plain sight, not hiding. It's kind of on its next to its cave, and it's not afraid. Here's my hand, here's my finger, there's a female over there, it's not afraid either. So they're not afraid of humans, they're not hiding, there's no other fish in this tank, so they feel confident. And so tip number 2, feeding. In order for your zebras to grow fast, they need to have constant access to food, because you are likely to keep them at higher temperatures. And I said 30 to 31 degrees Celsius, which is what I have here. This is what they would enjoy, and this is the temperature that they need in order to grow fast. Because of the high temperatures, your fish are likely to have higher rates of metabolism, which means that most of the time they will be hungry, and they need something to chew on pretty much all the time. So you need to provide them with foods constantly, not just once per day. There should be some food in their tank all the time, so whenever they like, they can just jump over to a place where the food is, and they can graze on it, and that will make them grow really fast. In terms of feeding zebra plecos, they are actually well, first of all, they're carnivores. Some people would say that juveniles need herbivorous diet, so they need some greens in their diet. I don't really know, I haven't seen any scientific evidence that juvenile L46 Zebra plecos are actually feeding on algae or any sort of green matter in the wild, because in the wild they will be mostly living at the depths of several meters, about 3 to 4 meters, hiding in the crevices, hiding among the rocks. So there would be very little algae over there, and as juveniles they would be too scared to come out into the open where they will be snatched by predators in order to feed on algae. So I don't think that juveniles actually need any green stuff, but you can still provide some dry foods that have some spirulina in it. So yeah, you need to provide your zebra plecos with a constant source of food. Food should always be present in their tank. Which means that if you have any tank mates, this is not really going to work, but because other fish will try to feed on the same food, or they will try to chase zebras away from food. That's why it works better if you have a dedicated setup where there's no other fish except zebras. Even if you have other Hypancistrus species, it's better not to mix them up, and it's better to keep zebras separately. So tip number 3, tank size. It's quite important that you pick up a correct tank for raising your zebras. Well, some people say that zebras need a minimum of 150 liters for a group of 5 or 6 fish. Others would say that they need 200 liters, and I've heard of someone even saying that they need about 300 liters to thrive. But the most important thing is that your zebras should have access to food in your tank, which means that if you have a large tank, most of the time your zebras will stay close to their hiding places. They very rarely will venture outside of these hiding places, even during the night. So they prefer to feed somewhere close to where their areas of comfort are, so where their caves, where their rocks are. So they will not swim too far from these places, because they would feel insecure. So even if you keep them in a 300-liter tank, they're likely to stay most of the time close to their hiding places. And if you provide high flow, it's likely that all the food gets carried away. It will get kind of carried away to one corner of your tank, and some of it will get sucked into your canister or some other filter you're using. So again, they will likely go hungry in a larger tank. If you have a smaller tank, and there will be more chances for your zebra plecos to actually find food. So for me, it always works better with the taller tanks rather than longer tanks. Yes, lots of zebra pleco keepers will say that longer and lower tanks are more preferable, but it's not always the case. At least on my own experience, I realized that taller and shorter tanks work much better. So why is this the case? Again, you can see my other male out in the open, not afraid, not hiding, just swimming on the rocks. In my case, I usually create this kind of upward rock structures using slate rocks, all sort of flat rocks, adding some pleco caves in between. Most of the time, these plecos would prefer some kind of a vertical structures over horizontal structures. Also, in a taller tank, you have more opportunities to create a better circulation of water. I have quite a lot of flow in here. I have a wave maker, air stone, and hang on the back filter, so they create lots of flow and lots of oxygen, and it kind of all goes around in a circle. So most of the food that gets in here, it goes back and it gets somewhere to the bottom, either on this side or on that other side, on the back side of this pile of rocks, and that's where they will fit. Quite a lot of the food will also settle down on the slate rocks, and they love to pick it up from the slate rocks. So I've had this pile of rocks in this tank nearby. This is a 150-liter tank, and I've tried twice moving them to this tank, again experimenting whether they would enjoy more space, but they didn't, because they would most of the time stay on the rocks and they would not venture outside. So most of the food in the larger tank gets carried away elsewhere, and they go hungry. So for me, smaller tank always works better, because that's where your plecos have more access to food. They prefer to stay on these vertical structures rather than on horizontal structures. That's where they feel comfortable. They will be out and about if they have hiding places, and they're comfortable with them, just like now. Right, tip number 4, water quality. Because you're constantly feeding your plecos, you provide them with food all the time, because they are living in relatively small quarters. Well, over here I have a 60-liter tank. You can have a slightly larger tank, or you can have a slightly smaller tank. Well, it depends on you. The most important thing is to provide them with top water quality, so zero ammonia, zero nitrites, and lower nitrates. I have here about nitrates at about 5, something like that, 5 to 0. So, which means that you need to do a lot of water changes, and you have to think about water changes pretty much in terms of discus level water changes. So daily or bi-daily water changes are preferable. And again, if you have a smaller tank, it's much easier to do larger water changes, and it's much easier to keep. Yeah, I know it sounds contradictory, because you would expect more stable conditions in a larger setup, in a larger tank, but in a smaller tank you have more opportunities to make larger water changes more frequently. At least it works for me. For example, I change here about 50% every second day, and water is perfectly clean, and there's no, I vacuum clean all the food, all the leftover food, so water quality is just great. And this is another thing that will make your zebra plecos to grow fast: high water quality. Again, you can certainly maintain excellent water quality in a larger tank, but yeah, if it's easier for you to do water changes in a larger tank rather than in a smaller tank. So these are my 4 tips to grow your zebra plecos really fast, and to get them to adult size within less than half a year. First of all, not a community fish. They need a dedicated setup. Second, proper feeding, proper diet, lots of food always available to them. Third is a proper tank size in order to facilitate them feeding properly, in order for them to be able to gain access to that food. And the 4th tip, water quality. Again, you need to maintain a top level, top-notch water quality in order for them to grow fast. The same tips would actually apply to most other Hypancistrus plecos, and I've had excellent results with growing king tiger plecos and few other Hypancistrus species, because they would enjoy exactly the same conditions as zebra plecos. So I hope this video was useful. Leave your comments in the comment sections, and I will see you soon in further videos.